Hello and welcome to SUNDAYSoul. It's a conversation. It is a show that makes you think about Sunday. All those good feelings of Sunday, whether it's a Sunday brunch or getting to hug somebody. That'll be great when we can do that again. But a Sunday feeling and a pull back of the curtain on some of the neatest people that I get to call friends and people that I know in the business. And today I am so thrilled to be welcomed by and to have her on the show with me today. Her name is Laura Reed. She is a musician from South Africa. Laura, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. So let's start here. For those, I want to give my listeners that maybe are not familiar with you a little crash course, and I love it. You just got comfortable. Like, I love
Yes.
that. Like, that's what this is. Like, when I describe this show to people, Laura, I say it's not an interview, right? Like, I did interviews for 17 years. This is a conversation. It's that Sunday feeling, as I mentioned, that just makes you feel good down in your bones. From South Africa, tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, so I'm half South Africa, but I'm also half Nashville. Originally born in South Africa. My mom's from South Africa. My family had come there during World War II, escaping, what was going on in Europe. And so I ended up being born there because my father, who's originally from East Nashville, he had gone to Africa after Vietnam and met my mom. And of course, they started a family and everything. And when I was about 6, we moved to the United States and moved to North Carolina, where my dad's parents had retired. And so I grew up kind of within a subculture in the United States that's a mixture of like South African culture, Indian culture. My grandfather's from India, my grandmother's from London. So it's like all these different kind of cultures. And then moving to like the South was interesting. And then my dad is very Southern. I mean, my family's been in East Nashville for generations. So, it's very much like, they put sugar on their strawberries and banana pudding and fried chicken. And so like real Southern culture, hillbilly Appalachian culture, basically mixed with, my mom's background, which is, it's literally spread all over the world. So that was kind of my beginning. That was my beginning foundation, is like an appreciation for culture, and also kind of probably a bit of an identity crisis because I didn't really belong anywhere. I wasn't completely South African, wasn't really American, didn't know where I was. And when I moved here, I had the really thick South African accent. So I got put in ESL, which stands for English as a Second Language. So by 3rd, 4th grade, I was speaking Spanish, because all my friends when I was growing up were all from Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico. And there was like me and this like one Russian kid. And I'm like, I speak English. They're like, we don't understand you. So that was my beginnings.
I think I can relate to that, because I think sometimes out of that lack of belonging, or that, that feeling of not belonging, right, can come some of the most beautiful things, some of the most beautiful characteristics. I was telling somebody the other day, when I grew up, I was like dark skin, dark hair, like, obviously, crazy last name. And I wanted to be blonde haired and named Sheila, and then I grew up, Laura, and I was like, wow, I love being different, and I love my last name, and I love my crazy ethnicity. But when I was young, I didn't, but now I embrace it to the nth degree.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's, that's part of growing up, is like learning to really love yourself. And it can take a lifetime sometimes, and it's beautiful when you meet young people or children that are already tuned in, who they are, and they get it and they identify. But I think, it's interesting because I'm always, a lot of my closest relationships, even my marriage, I am always drawn to other people that are multicultural. I think because we can identify, there's also this, like, we call it like the immigrant syndrome, where you never really think that you can take up too much space because it's like, I don't really belong. I wasn't born here, and I'm lucky to be here, kind of that kind of vibe, So it's always been interesting. And more recently, moving to Nashville for music and everything, I've gotten in touch with my dad's roots. Because growing up, it was like my mom's parents lived in the house, my grandparents, my family's very traditional. You know, our grandparents lived in the house with us, and like, you know, I still talk to my family every day, and all my aunts and uncle. Like, I have over 50 first cousins. Big family, girl, a lot of family. And I was always close to my mom's side, and then more recently getting in touch with my dad's side, this American side of myself that I didn't know much about, which I'm starting to find out more of, like my ancestors, which were like, you know, they were basically sharecroppers, like in this Appalachian area around Nashville. And my aunt started doing like family tree stuff and sending me photos, and the photos are amazing because I have Mammy Reed, who I guess would have been my great great grandmother on my grandma's side from Ireland, and she's like this hard lady. Like, they were just, you know, subsistence farming, Irish, mixed with. Then I have photos of on my grandfather's side where it was like a mix of like Native American, which I don't know the tribal roots or anything, but it's cool seeing the photos because it's like dark skin in like Victorian clothes.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wow, I wonder what these people were like. Now I'm living in the neighborhood where I can walk to my grandparents' old house where my dad lived as a child, you know, so I'm back in my ancestral neighborhood. And I'm like really curious about like the other side of myself and who I am, and still trying to grasp an identity. And it's interesting because I had an epiphany very recently in Mexico where I was thinking about this, and out in nature where I get a lot of my answers. And the answer that came to me was, you are a person made of many people. You are always my child. So like, kind of like, don't worry so much about countries and backgrounds and you know, all these things that I was like kind of curious about and thirsty and feeling like I don't know the answers. So who am I? And it's like, oh, you're a person made of many people. Love yourself.
I love it. I love it. So let me ask you this. When you look at coming to Nashville and your music career, I know your story, but I would love for you to share it with our viewers, our listeners, because you did not conform. People told you you had to do this to be successful. You had to do this to be successful. You had to do this. You did not conform. And woo, there is so much power in that. Tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting. I think it's a personality thing. I always had a vision, and even though, you know, I'm still trying to find kind of where I belong, I always knew who I was. And it's like, I've been the same my whole life. You know, I've always been just colorful and expressive, and if I see you, I want to hug you, and all these things that are who I am. And, you know, we're very similar in that way. And when I started my path of doing music, it was always to do music for good, you know. And when I first started, I refused to keep any of the money. I was like, I don't want to taint the songs that I'm writing or my vision. And so I would choose different charities and donate everything. And of course, this is when I'm 15, 16 years old, so I don't have bills, you know. So it's easy to be like, yeah, I'm just going to donate it. I got older. You know, I'm living by myself by 17, and I'm like, maybe I need to keep some of the money. I might make the charity case now. But it was interesting. There was always this like very pure intention behind why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's good to always have that center, that grounding, because, you know, before I knew it, you know, years passed. My journey is a long one. I did it the long way. You know, I started playing on the street. You know, I left home at 17 and I was playing the street in New Orleans and in Boone, North Carolina, in the mountains. You know, I spent a lot of time in Appalachia, in New York. I mean, I would go travel, and first thing I would do was find the Plaza de Armas. You know, if I went to Cusco in Peru, I would find the square and go play on the street. So it was like, for me, that's my comfort zone. And it was from there that people saw me, that George Clinton found out about me from a bunch of New Orleans musicians. You know, I got a call when I'm like 21 to come sing backgrounds on this record with George Clinton. And it turned into me co-producing vocals with him and writing songs and doing shows. And it was just because I had made an impression as a busker. So it's like those things led. And then I got my first, we got a record deal. I had a band, and then I end up coming to Nashville, and you're at Sony, and you start to dilute yourself a little bit. If it's like you start to add people to your team, which is important.
Yes.
We need help, especially me. Like, I could probably come up with a great marketing plan and great ideas for someone else. It's always easy to give someone else advice, but to market yourself, you have to, it's hard to compartmentalize. So you have to add on to your team. And, it's like finding the right people that don't dilute who you are and why you do this. And I've walked away from big opportunities. I fired the big managers that everyone's like, you're lucky to even work with them. And I'm like, well, I mean, we're all just humans, and I don't feel like this is a good fit. And I'm not going to wear that or do that. Like, I'm not out here selling, that's not what I'm selling.
Yeah.
I was like, you think I'll have to pay more for that? But it was, I never even thought that I was such a nonconformist until I look back, and when I first came to Nashville, I had dreadlocks past my knees, and I had this small baby. I'm basically a single mom at this point. Things hadn't worked out with my husband at the time. And, I was kind of left with my son, and had all these songs and had this passion for music. And I am very blessed because I keep having my paths cross with amazing people.
Yes.
And Paul Worley being one of them. Paul Worley discovered and produced all the Dixie Chicks music, Lady Antebellum. I mean, he's just iconic, but he's also like a godfather for me. And he had brought me to Nashville, let me stay at his home. I'm meeting all these people through him. And you have to understand, Paul is definitely respected in this community, and his reach, is very wide. But I would kind of meet people, and they'd be like, all right, you're working with Paul, or you're doing this, or now you're at Sony. So, okay, hits. We need some hits. We need this. We need that. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. I want to reach as many people as possible. I'm almost kind of like a child. I'm just like, yes, I just want to travel the world, make music, and reach people. And, I would chug along always. And then as soon as it was something that didn't feel right with my soul, I was like, oh, no, not doing that. Mm-hmm. And, maybe things would have happened faster for me in a scale, what we think of success. But for me, it was like, I've stayed true to myself and kept my lights on since I was 17 years old doing music. So for me, that's success. And whenever I start to lose my way, I'm like, why do I do this? And I think of the 15-year-old girl donating her money to African charities after she plays a gig, and be like, yes, I have to stay true to that girl.
I love that.
Like, yeah, because I think that it's very easy in our industry to just try and please everyone.
I think that's in general, though, Laura. I think so many people are going to be watching this. And by the way, cheers. You have your tea. I have my celery juice.
This is coffee.
Yeah, tea, coffee. But in your
I had my celery juice before. First thing in the morning, I had my celery juice.
It is, by the way, and we're going to get into it later on, but she and I are both very homeopathically inclined. And if you have not checked it out, read The Medical Medium. He talks about the power, the infinite power of celery juice alone in the morning, 16 ounces. Give it 30 minutes for anything else to get in your system. And it literally starts at your esophagus and goes down through your body and hits so many organs, your blood, your liver, and it's like a miracle cure for
I love it.
The maladies.
Yeah, no, I love it. I can tell the difference. I didn't have celery juice last week, and I felt completely different. So I make a big, what is this word? Growler.
Yeah.
I make a big growler of it, and I put a little bit of key lime juice in there just to kind of preserve it or whatever. And oh, it's so good.
It's interesting. And we were talking about conforming, and this is where I want to wrap it into everybody who may be listening, especially women, and men too, but especially women. We get these messages our whole life that we're too short, too fat, too tall, too stupid, too overeducated for this, TOO. And I go into colleges and groups across the country and tell them, you are enough. You are amazing. In all of the world, the same creator, whatever it is that you believe that created the Andes and the Himalayan mountains and all these natural wonders, thought that the world needed one of you too. You are amazing. And so I think that message of you not conforming, and really you said something that got me, and that's a way to check in with yourself. That's a way to check in with your soul. And if anything, Laura, during COVID, things have gotten really quiet around us. You see where nature's coming back. You see all these things happening. I think it's given us the opportunity to hear that voice again, to hear that still small voice, to say, that doesn't feel good. That does feel good. Maybe I need to do this. I think it's given us that opportunity to reset.
Totally. Reset has been definitely my thought, because we've always talked about this. I believe everyone has a purpose. I really do. I believe everyone has their own story and their journey for a reason. And it's like our thumbprint, our fingerprint. And it's so easy to get distracted. There's so many things these days to distract us. And, even though I feel like I'm a pretty centered person, I get distracted. And there's definitely been times where I'm like, okay, I'll sing that thing, or okay, I'll do that, because, everyone around me is like, that's what it is. This is the look. This is the thing.
Yeah.
And then I look back and I'm like, oh, that was so unfulfilling. And I was straying, and, there's something about, you get a lot done when you don't have to ask for permission. So there's something about being independent. Woo! That'll preach. Seriously, and I've always been proud about being independent. I have been with record labels. I have been with major publishers, but I was always, definitely the CEO of Laura Reed, because it was so important, because I don't even feel like I own these words or any of this. I'm meditating, I'm praying, I'm setting intentions for these songs and trying to be a vessel. So for me, it's like I'm reverent about it. It's something more important than, just going and entertaining people. And it's like, to make money, there's way easier ways to make money. To be famous, anyone can be famous now. I mean, it's easy.
Yeah.
So it's like, it has to be something else, and I realize that. And interesting enough, COVID also kind of reminded me, because until recently, the music industry, now everything is streamed. Everybody in the business was like, all right, the only way to make money now is shows. So just focus on your live business. And then they're like, and now you can do no shows. And we don't know when you can do shows again. So all of us musicians and artists are just like, but we love this. How do we figure out another thing? Okay, I'm going to live stream. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it's like, it really brings you back to, why do you do this? Does it bring you joy? Like, what is this about? And it always comes back to people, connecting with people, It's,
I love that.
I think that's the thing for me. And, just empathy, being vulnerable. You share these songs that, for me, like, I wrote by myself in a dark time or a hard time while I'm emotionally mining and trying to find my way. And these words come to me, and then I share them, and someone I've never met before, they hear those words, and it's like, we just united, we just connected. That spirit moving through all of us, and the medicine that is music. It's medicine.
Yes. Speaking of that, I don't want to hold you off any longer for our listeners. I want them to hear you. If you would play, it's one of my favorites, Struggle. And I think it is such a perfect song for where we are right now.
Happily. Now, I will warn you, this is early in the morning for our listeners out there. So this is Struggle, and it's from the album The Awakening. So The Awakening was just that, and this song was such an epiphany for me. So and I'm playing with a pick because in quarantine I can't get my nails done. So it's real out here, y'all. It's those little things that you get attached to. I'm like, I can't play guitar without my long nails on this hand. And it's like, no, you can. Figure it out.
Yeah.
Somebody felt the pressure. Bodies ran his Always got a storm passing through. Somebody got a mouth to feed. Somebody got far to travel. Somebody lives in the streets. Their own worlds unraveled. Every question got an answer. Every lock has got a key. Every day's another chance for us to write our history. Everybody got a story. Everybody got a struggle. Everybody got worries. Everybody got trouble. Everybody got a story. Everybody got a struggle. Yeah. Everybody got purpose. Got a path to follow. Always be another test. Always be another trial. Then to get off your chest. Another road, another mile. Time turns mountains to sand. Time turns sand into pearls. Time waits for no one man. One man can change the world. Everybody got a story. Everybody got a struggle. Everybody got worries. Everybody got trouble. Everybody got a story. Everybody got a struggle. Yeah. Everybody got purpose. Got a path to follow. I don't mind to grow. I don't mind. I don't mind the struggle. No, 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 no. I don't mind to grow. I don't mind. I don't mind the struggle. No, 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 no. Oh.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I feel like I've been reading a lot about this lately, and it's it's where we are right now, and people projecting, Laura, like, okay, like, I'm okay, so you should be okay. I'm not fearful, so you shouldn't be fearful. I got my check, and projecting, right? And
Right.
And the way that I've seen people really describe it that I think has been great is we're all in the same storm. We're not all in the same boat, right? And I think that song was a great anthem for where we are and what we could possibly learn about ourselves, about the world, about what we want, about our families, about so many things, right? This touches and how we can come out of COVID better in one way or another.
Right. Well, I agree. I mean, the thing is that it's like a collective vision quest. We're all going through it, and one person is, having a tougher time than the next, and it's really up to us to lift each other up, not separate, not polarize, but as humans, we do this. I love analogies and metaphors. I love this of the storm and the boat. Recently someone said something to me the other day that really hit home, where it was just about projecting. And he's like, when you look in the mirror and your hair's messed up, you don't fix your hair in the mirror. You got to fix it on yourself. And I was like, oh, they were talking to me. It was an elder talking to me about relationships, and he's a Lakota elder, and he had been with his husband for 30 years. And I asked him for advice. I was like, tell me how you guys make it work. And he told me this, and I was like, oh, I will remember that every day. Because I'll go and I'll find that I want to, pick apart something on someone else, or I'm judging something, and it's like, hold on, fix your own hair, darling.
It's so simple yet so profound.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the power of words, like metaphors, poetry, all these things where we can be like, oh, wow, yes, we are in a storm. Am I on the same boat as someone else? No. Should I think about what it's like for them? Yeah, that's empathy. Like I was thinking the other day how blessed I've been to just be in my garden and have a little bit of soil to work and put my hands into and grow food. And that's been like a sanctuary. And I was like, wow, I was thinking about all the people in cities like New York and Chicago, and where they're in apartments, you know, maybe with small children and their family, you know, maybe they're in an abusive relationship and they're stuck with that person. Like, man, I've been feeling for all those other people that aren't in the same boat as me, you know. And I think that's important, you know, just to be constantly putting ourselves in other people's shoes. It opens your mind.
You gave me a great segue to talk about the garden, and you are, and I have to give the context in the background. You talked about how, I'm gonna try not to cry, but you talked about how like music connects. And and so I went to one of your shows in Atlanta with a friend, and I remember it was with this awesome friend group in Atlanta, and just adored them. And I can be back. I remember the dress I wore. I remember dancing. I just love these people. And I went, and I remember we met you backstage, and I have a lot of musician friends, so I didn't want to take up too much of your time. I wanted to be cognizant. You had people kind of waiting to meet you. And so that was that. And then you came after I moved to Nashville. You came and you played Nashville. And I remember you were signing records, vinyl. You were like one of the reasons I started like my vinyl collection and started listening to vinyl again. And you signed that record. And then I don't know where from there it went. I just remember when you would come into town, we became friends. And when you would come into town, you would stay here. And then I got to meet your family, and your family became like my family, and you're like the godparents to my dog. And it was that music, that connection, that got us to where we are today. And that's what I want to say to anybody who's discovering Laura Reed for the first time. Her music is something that, if you're a family, can touch your kids, can touch the parents, can touch the grandparents. If you're a single person and you're solo, it can touch you. I mean, it is really, you tell stories in your music. It's beautiful. It's inspiring. We want to use it with the movement I'm Changing the Narrative, because it's so, I mean, it's amazing. And so that's my story. That's how I got to know you. I fell in love with the music, and then I got to know you as a human being. And it's been amazing. So with that said, you have taught me about gardening, and you talked about being back in Mother Earth and being out in the garden. And you mentioned people that don't have that, Laura. And I think about that too. I think about that too. I think about every time I get to put my hands in the dirt or be out in my backyard or do those things, I think about people that don't. And so I think that's where the empathy and not projecting and saying, you know what, I don't feel fear, but you may be gripped by fear. So I'm going to hold space for you. Right. And I think that's the best thing we can do right now during COVID. And then when we go back to our lives.
Totally. Well, and I think for me, empathy is a revolution, because if you can empathize with someone's pain, it's like you can connect. We can understand each other through pain as much as love, as much as the positive things. It's like that's what struggle is about. It's about, the human condition. Like, we all have a pain. We all have trouble. We all have a struggle. But it's like, just embrace that. Like, turn your pain into pearls. You know, I love the analogy of the oyster and a pearl. A pearl starts as a grain of sand. It starts as something that is troubling, that is a struggle for that oyster. Like, it might be the worst thing that's ever happened to that oyster is that grain of sand that got in, and it turns it into the most beautiful thing that can last forever. So I think of that all the time, and just, putting ourselves in people's positions, and it's like no one's above or below anyone. It's just like different circumstances. I lived in small apartments in cities for a long time with my son, and I was saying to my husband and him, I was like, man, I'm glad we got this yard and we can go outside, because I don't know what we'd be doing if we were all stuck inside. Because for me, I need nature. I need soil. I need the earth. I'm deeply connected. And I'm sure there are a lot of other people that, got stranded in other places. There's also a lot of people that you give them some soil in a garden, they wouldn't know what to do. But I bet you when they get their hands in that dirt, they're going to feel good.